You wake up at 3 in the morning with a realization so stark it feels like falling. No one is coming. Not your parents, not your partner, not your therapist, not God, not the universe. No one is coming to fix you, to complete you, to finally make you feel whole. And in that moment, sprawled in the dark, you understand something that makes your chest tighten. You've been waiting your entire life for someone to arrive. You've disguised it well. You call it love when you scan someone's face for approval. You call it ambition when you chase validation through achievement. You call it spirituality when you pray for intervention. You call it connection when you desperately need someone to confirm you exist. But underneath all these respectable names lies the same primitive hope that someone, somewhere, possesses the key to your salvation. And if you're good enough, broken enough, worthy enough, they'll finally use it. This isn't a confession of weakness. This is the structure of how you were taught to exist. Every message you received as a child whispered the same promise. Completion comes from outside. Your parents would make you feel safe. Your achievements would make you feel valuable. Your partner would make you feel loved. Your purpose would make you feel real. The entire architecture of your life has been built around this transaction, this waiting, this elaborate system of looking anywhere but directly at yourself. And now, something has shifted. Maybe someone left. Maybe someone stayed, but you realized they couldn't save you anyway. Maybe you got everything you thought you wanted and still felt empty. Maybe you just got tired, bone-deep tired, of performing for an audience that will never arrive. Whatever the catalyst, you now see the machinery clearly. You've been outsourcing your existence, waiting for permission to finally inhabit your own life. But what if I told you that this devastating realization, this moment that feels like abandonment, is actually the beginning of your only real freedom? Most people spend their entire lives never touching this truth. They die surrounded by people, still waiting. They construct increasingly elaborate fantasies about who will finally see them, finally fix them, finally make the emptiness stop. They call it hope, they call it faith, they call it love. But Heidegger had a different word for it. He called it inauthenticity, this fundamental flight from your own existence, this refusal to face what he termed thrownness, the brute fact that you've been thrown into existence without instruction manual, without guarantee, without anyone who can live your life for you. You exist. That's the brutal starting point, not because you earned it, not because someone granted it, not because it means anything in particular. You simply exist, and this existence is entirely and irretrievably yours. No one else can be hungry for you, die for you, or face the fundamental fact of your being for you. This is what Heidegger meant by Dasein being there, the entity for whom its own being is an issue. You are the only one who can resolve the question of your existence, and you've spent decades trying to delegate this responsibility to anyone else. The old way of existing was built on a beautiful lie that you are incomplete, that wholeness exists somewhere outside you, that your job is to find the right person, belief system, achievement, or substance that will finally make you real. This is the hedonic treadmill at its most existential. Not just chasing pleasure, but chasing existence itself through external validation. Every relationship becomes a rescue mission. Every achievement becomes a plea for confirmation. Every moment alone becomes unbearable, because without a witness, without someone to complete you, you're not sure you exist at all. And if this sounds like an exaggeration, pay attention to what happens when you're alone for more than a few hours. Notice the desperate reaching for your phone, for distraction, for anything that confirms someone out there is thinking of you. Notice how you construct elaborate fantasies of being seen, being saved, being finally understood. Notice how the prospect of complete self-reliance feels not liberating but terrifying, like being asked to perform surgery on yourself without anesthetic. This is what happened to you. Somewhere along the way, you learned that your existence required external authentication. You learned to scan faces for approval, like a pilot checking instruments. You learned to construct your sense of self from the reflected gaze of others. You learned that being alone with yourself was dangerous, that the unwitnessed life was not worth living, that salvation existed anywhere except in your own hands. And this learning was so complete, so total, that you forgot you were doing it. The waiting for rescue became as natural as breathing. Let me give you an analogy. Imagine you're in a dark room, and you've been told since childhood that there's a light switch somewhere. and someone will come eventually to turn it on. So you wait. You wait in the dark, straining to hear footsteps, calling out occasionally, making yourself as appealing as possible, so whoever has the switch will want to use it for you. You develop elaborate theories about where the person is, why they're delayed, what you need to do to make them arrive faster. Years pass. You become an expert at waiting. You learn to navigate the dark room, but always with this sense that you're in a temporary state, that real life will begin when someone flips that switch. You form relationships with other people waiting in the dark, and you promise to be each other's light bringers, but somehow it never quite works. You achieve things in the dark, you experience pleasure in the dark, but always with this undertone of incompleteness. This sense that you're living a provisional existence until someone arrives to make it real. Then, one day, by accident, your hand brushes against the wall, and you feel it. The switch? It's been there the entire time. You've walked past it thousands of times, but you weren't looking for it because you were looking for the person who would flip it for you. And in this moment, you face a choice more terrifying than the dark ever was. If you flip the switch yourself, if you take responsibility for your own illumination, you have to give up the story. You have to give up the romance of being saved. You have to give up the comfortable position of victim, of the one who waits, of the incomplete person who needs completion. You have to face something unbearable. You are the person you've been waiting for. You've always been that person. And here's the thing about that switch, about that responsibility. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. You can pretend you didn't notice. You can keep waiting. But now you know. You know that every moment you spend waiting is a choice. A choice to remain in the dark. A choice to keep telling yourself the story of your own helplessness. This is what's happening when you realize no one is coming to save you. Your hand has found the switch. And the question is no longer whether someone will arrive, but whether you'll reach for your own power or spend the rest of your life pretending you never found it. And if this is resonating with something deep inside you, you might want to stay. We go into these territories every week, the places most people spend their lives avoiding. You know where the button is? Now, here's what most people do with this realization. They panic. They try to outsource the problem of their own existence even more desperately. They find new saviors, new systems, new relationships, new substances, anything to avoid the fundamental responsibility of their own being. They treat the realization that no one is coming as a problem to be solved rather than a truth to be inhabited. You can see this everywhere. Someone realizes their partner can't complete them, so they find a new partner, hoping this one will be different. Someone realizes achievement doesn't fill the void, so they chase bigger achievements, better achievements, thinking the problem was scale rather than category. Someone realizes religion didn't save them, so they find a new spiritual system, a new guru, a new practice that promises what the last one failed to deliver. This is the trap. This is how the realization that no one is coming gets converted back into the search for someone who's coming. Because the mind can't tolerate the full weight of this truth, it finds increasingly sophisticated ways to avoid it. You start looking for the person who will teach you to save yourself, not realizing this is just another version of the same transaction. You start seeking experiences that will transform you, not realizing you're still waiting for transformation to come from outside. And the cruelty is that each iteration, each new attempt to find salvation externally, digs the hole deeper. You're like someone trying to climb out of a pit by digging faster. Every attempt to escape your own existence by finding completion in another person, another achievement, another experience, reinforces the fundamental belief that you are incomplete, that you require external authentication, that your existence is not sufficient in itself. Heidegger called this falling, this constant flight from your own being into the world of others, into the they-self, into what everyone does, what everyone thinks, what everyone seeks. You fall into relationships not as a free being meeting another free being, but as an incomplete fragment seeking its missing piece. You fall into work not as someone expressing their existence, but as someone trying to prove their existence. You fall into pleasure not as someone capable of experiencing, but as someone trying to escape the experience of themselves. And the exhaustion you feel, that bone-deep tiredness, that's not depression, though it might look like it. That's the exhaustion of a lifetime spent running from the one thing you can never escape, yourself. That's what it costs to maintain the fiction that someone else can live your life for you. Let me tell you about someone I knew. He was the kind of person everyone wanted to save. Brilliant, broken, perpetually on the edge of something, either breakthrough or breakdown. You were never quite sure. He had a gift for making people feel like they were the one. The person who would finally understand him, finally fix him, finally make him whole. And people tried. God, did they try? Partners threw themselves into the project of his salvation. Friends stayed up until dawn trying to talk him back from edges. Therapists extended sessions, broke their own rules, convinced themselves he was different, that their intervention would be the one that worked. He collected these rescue attempts like trophies, proof that he mattered, that his existence registered in the universe. But here's what was happening beneath the surface. Every rescue attempt confirmed his fundamental belief that he was broken, that he needed fixing, that his existence required external validation. Every person who tried to save him became another piece of evidence that he couldn't save himself. The very thing he desperately sought, this feeling of being seen and saved, was the thing that kept him trapped in his own helplessness. Then, something happened. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just small and undeniable. The person he was most sure would save him left. Not with anger or fanfare, just quietly, with something like sadness and something like relief. And in the silence after that departure, he was alone with something he'd spent his entire life avoiding, himself. He told me later that the first few weeks were like withdrawal. He reached for his phone every few minutes, composing messages he didn't send, checking for signs that someone was thinking of him, that he still existed in someone else's mind. He cycled through old relationships in his head, wondering if he could revive any of them. Not because he wanted those specific people, but because he needed someone, anyone, to be the audience for his existence. But gradually, something else emerged. Not peace, not healing, nothing so clean. More like a kind of stark clarity. He started to see how he'd constructed his entire life as a performance for a savior who was never coming. How every choice had been made with this implicit question: will this make someone rescue me? How exhausting it had been, how much energy he'd spent maintaining his own helplessness. And he made a choice, not a dramatic one. He just started doing the things he'd always waited for someone else to give him permission to do. Small things at first, cooking a real meal instead of eating from packages, going for a walk because he wanted to, not because his therapist suggested it. Sitting with discomfort instead of immediately reaching for a phone, a substance, a person, treating himself like someone who mattered, not because someone else confirmed it, but because he decided it. The interesting thing is that he didn't become some transformed person, some before and after story of redemption. He became quieter, more ordinary. The drama left his life. The desperate intensity that had made him so compelling, so in need of saving, faded. People who'd been drawn to the project of fixing him lost interest. And he discovered something unexpected. He preferred this. He preferred existing without an audience. He preferred the strange, simple responsibility of his own life. This is what no one tells you about, realizing no one is coming to save you. It's not a tragedy, it's a doorway. But it's a doorway that looks exactly like abandonment, exactly like loneliness, exactly like everything you've been taught to fear. And that's why most people spend their lives standing outside it, waiting for someone to walk through it with them, not understanding that this is precisely the door you must walk through alone. If you're still here, still following this thread, you already know this isn't comfortable content. We don't do comfortable here. Consider subscribing if you want to keep exploring these depths. What you need now is not another person to complete you, not another system to save you, not another experience to transform you. What you need is to face what Heidegger called being towards death, this fundamental recognition that your existence is yours alone, that no one else can die for you, and therefore no one else can live for you either. This sounds morbid, but it's actually the opposite. It's the recognition that makes authentic life possible. Because here's what changes when you stop waiting for rescue. You start making choices from a completely different place. Not from what will make someone love me, not from what will prove I'm worthy, not from what will finally make me feel complete, but from something much simpler and much more radical. What do I actually want? What does my existence require? What serves the fact of my being here? These questions sound simple, but for someone who's spent their life looking to others for answers, they're almost impossible to approach. Because they require you to trust something you've been taught is fundamentally untrustworthy, your own experience, your own judgment, your own existence. They require you to stop performing for an imagined audience and start living for the only consciousness that actually has to live your life, yours. This is what Heidegger meant by authenticity. Not some abstract moral category, not becoming your best self, not living up to your potential. Just this. Taking responsibility for the fact that you exist, that this existence is entirely yours, that no one else can resolve the question of what to do with it. Authenticity is what happens when you stop trying to hand your life to someone else and start living it yourself. And I must warn you about something. If you're expecting this to feel like liberation, like some rush of freedom and power, you might be disappointed. Because taking responsibility for your own existence, genuinely taking it on, is heavy. It means you can't blame your parents anymore, can't blame your circumstances, can't blame the person who left or the person who stayed. It means every choice is yours, every moment is yours, every feeling is yours to face. Most people read about authenticity and think it sounds empowering. Then they try to live it and realize why everyone chooses the elaborate fiction of needing rescue instead. Because being rescued is actually easier. Being incomplete is actually comfortable. Waiting for someone else to make you real requires no courage at all. But facing your own existence, taking responsibility for the fact that you're here and no one else can be here for you, that requires something most people aren't willing to give. It requires you to sit with yourself without distraction, to make choices without guaranteed outcomes, to exist without constant confirmation that you're existing correctly, to feel whatever you feel without immediately reaching for someone to make it stop, to be alone without feeling abandoned, to be with others without making them responsible for your existence, to live without a script, without a savior, without the comfortable story of your own helplessness. You might think this sounds rather bleak, rather lonely, rather cold. And yes, there's a starkness to it. But consider what you're comparing it to. Consider the exhaustion of constantly performing for an audience that never arrives. Consider the desperate quality of relationships built on mutual rescue attempts. Consider the emptiness of achievement pursued as proof of existence rather than expression of it. Consider the prison of needing external validation to feel real. The old way wasn't working. You know this? That's why you're here, reading about the moment when you realize no one is coming. Because some part of you already knows that the waiting has to end, that the performance has to stop, that the elaborate fiction of your own incompleteness has to be faced. There was a woman, a writer, who built her entire career on being saved. Every essay was about the person who rescued her, the system that transformed her, the experience that finally made her whole. She had a gift for making readers feel like they were witnessing redemption, like they were part of her salvation story. And people loved it. They loved seeing someone so publicly broken, so publicly in need, so publicly grateful when someone stepped in, but privately, she was drowning. Because every essay, every public rescue made the next crisis necessary. She needed to be broken so she could be fixed. She needed to be lost so she could be found. She needed to be incomplete so someone could complete her. Her entire existence had become a performance of neediness, and she couldn't stop, because the moment she stopped needing rescue, she wasn't sure who she would be. Then, her mother died. And in the weeks after, something unexpected happened. No one came, not in the way she expected. People offered condolences, brought casseroles, said the right things, but no one could reach into the grief and pull her out. No one could make her mother not. No one could rescue her from the fundamental fact of loss, of mortality, of being a person who continues to exist even when someone essential stops existing. She spent nights alone in her mother's house, going through papers, and she found letters her mother had written but never sent. Letters to her, to the daughter who was always waiting to be saved. And in those letters, her mother wrote, "I cannot live your life for you. I wish I could. I wish I could take this weight from you. But you have to learn to carry yourself. No one can do this for you." She told me this made her angry at first. Angry that her mother, even in death, was refusing to save her. But then something cracked open. She realized her mother wasn't refusing. Her mother was telling the truth that no one had ever told her, that this life, with all its weight and beauty and impossibility, was hers to carry. That waiting for someone else to carry it was not just futile, it was a way of never really living. She stopped writing essays about being saved, she stopped performing her brokenness, and something interesting happened. Most of her readers left. They didn't want to read about someone taking responsibility for their own existence. They wanted the drama, the rescue, the confirmation that someone out there could fix them too, and she let them go. She started writing from a different place, not from need, but from existence itself. Smaller audience, quieter work, but real in a way nothing had been before. This is what happens when you stop waiting for rescue. You lose the people who were only there for the performance. You lose the drama that made you feel alive. You lose the comfortable story of your own victory. And what you gain is harder to describe because it's not dramatic, not exciting, not the kind of thing that makes a good story. What you gain is your life. Not a better life, not a transformed life, not a life finally worth living because someone authenticated it. Just your life, exactly as it is, as yours to inhabit. This might sound like nothing, and compared to the fantasy of being saved, it is nothing. But it's the only thing that's real. You're in the middle of this process right now, whether you recognize it or not. That's what the 3M realization was about. That's what the bone-deep exhaustion is about. That's what this strange, stark clarity is about. Something in you is dying, and you're grieving it, and that's appropriate. You should grieve it. You're losing the story you've told yourself since childhood. The story that kept you waiting, kept you incomplete, kept you searching for someone to make you real. But listen carefully. What's dying is not your capacity for connection, not your ability to be loved, not your worthiness of care. What's dying is the belief that someone else can live your life for you. What's dying is the fantasy that the right person, belief, or experience will finally make you complete. What's dying is the elaborate performance of helplessness that kept you safe from your own power. And yes, it feels like dying because something is dying. The self you constructed around the need to be saved is dissolving, and what's underneath is raw, uncertain, frighteningly responsible. It's you without the performance, without the waiting, without the comfortable position of victim. It's you as you actually are, an existence that is irretrievably yours, that no one else can resolve, that carries its own weight. This is not a punishment. This is not abandonment. This is the human condition. What Heidegger spent his entire philosophical career pointing toward, you are thrown into existence. You did not choose this. No one can live it for you. And your only real choice is whether to face this fact authentically or spend your life running from it. Now, here's what you do. And I mean this practically, not philosophically. You start treating yourself like someone who matters, not because someone else confirmed it, but because you exist. You start making choices from your own judgment rather than scanning for external approval. You start sitting with discomfort instead of immediately reaching for rescue. You start asking, what do I actually want? Instead of what will make someone love me? You stop waiting to feel ready. You stop waiting for permission. You stop waiting for someone to tell you it's okay to inhabit your own life, because that permission will never come. No one has the authority to give it except you, and you've spent your whole life not realizing you already have it. When you notice yourself performing helplessness, stop. When you notice yourself waiting for someone to save you from a feeling, sit with the feeling instead. When you notice yourself making choices based on who might rescue you, make a choice based on what serves your existence. When you notice yourself scanning faces for approval, look away and find the approval in your own chest. This sounds simple. It's not. Because every time you do this, every time you take responsibility for your own existence, instead of outsourcing it, you face the full weight of being human. You face the fact that you're here, that you didn't ask to be here, that no one can tell you what to do with this fact, that you have to decide for yourself what your existence means and requires. And here's the paradox. The moment you stop waiting for someone to save you is the moment you become capable of real connection. Because now you're meeting others as a complete being, not as a fragment seeking its missing piece. You're choosing them because you want them, not because you need them to make you real. You're offering your existence, not your neediness. You're capable of love instead of rescue seeking, but you can't force this. You can't make yourself stop waiting by trying harder to stop waiting. Because trying to stop waiting is just another form of waiting. Waiting for the day when you no longer wait. Instead, you have to see clearly that no one is coming. Feel the full weight of that truth. grieve the fantasy, and then slowly, gradually, start living as if you already have everything you need to exist, because you do. You always have. What you need to stop doing is simpler. Stop scanning for saviors. Stop constructing fantasies of rescue. Stop making yourself smaller so someone will want to complete you. Stop performing brokenness as a way of mattering. Stop waiting for permission to exist fully. Stop checking if others confirm your reality. Stop making every relationship an audition for the role of rescuer. And here's the thing that will sound like a contradiction but isn't. Stop trying to not need anyone. Because the goal isn't isolation, isn't some fantasy of complete self-sufficiency, isn't becoming so independent you never need anything from anyone. The goal is to relate to others from existence rather than from lack, to want rather than need, to choose rather than cling. But you can't get there by force. You get there by seeing clearly what's true and letting that truth reshape how you move through the world. The paradox is this. The moment you truly accept that no one can save you, that no one can live your life for you, that your existence is irretrievably yours alone, you stop feeling abandoned. Because you can't be abandoned by something that was never possible. You can't be left by someone who was never supposed to carry you. The abandonment you feel is the death of an illusion, not the loss of something real. And once that illusion dies, once you stop waiting for what was never coming, you discover something underneath. Something that was always there but invisible while you were looking everywhere else for it. You discover that you are sufficient. Not because you're perfect, not because you have everything figured out, not because you don't need anything, but because existence itself is sufficient. The fact that you're here, that you experience, that you continue, that's enough. It doesn't need external authentication to be real. This is what happens when you stop looking for someone to save you. You stop experiencing your existence as a problem to be solved and start experiencing it as a fact to be lived. You stop waiting for your life to begin and realize it's been happening the entire time. You stop performing for an audience that never arrives and start simply being. Heidegger called this resoluteness, this moment when you take ownership of your existence, when you stop fleeing from your own being, when you face the fact that you're here and no one else can be here for you. And resoluteness isn't something you achieve once and maintain forever. It's something you practice, something you return to every time you notice yourself waiting, performing, scanning for rescue. Every morning you wake up, you face this choice again. Will you live today as someone waiting to be saved, or as someone who takes responsibility for their own existence? Will you make choices based on what might make someone rescue you, or based on what serves the fact of your being here? Will you scan for external validation, or trust your own experience? Will you perform helplessness, or inhabit your power? Most days, you'll choose both.